AP Gov, Merry Christmas Eve Eve. I'll let you guys know that I'll be doing a PowerPoint presentation today, and I'm going to go through it fairly quickly, so you guys can totally take notes or pause it or whatever you need to do, rewatch it. And then it's going to be pretty quick, so you can feel free to research some of the Supreme Court cases that I'm talking about on your own. And I encourage you to do so. So this is on provisions of the First Amendment. Speech, religion, press, assembly, petition. This presentation is going to be going through a couple notable Supreme Court decisions regarding these different provisions contained within the First Amendment. When you're researching Supreme Court cases, I definitely suggest oyez.org. It's the Chicago Kent School of Law. It's really good. It gives you the main point of the Supreme Court decision without going into all the minor details. You don't need to know all the details of these cases. You just need to know the main thing, like the major precedent that they set. Alright, let's get to it. Since 1965, no less than 31% of Supreme Court cases have involved civil liberties. That's hundreds of cases. Every individual case incorporates the Bill of Rights into national policy, or parts of the Bill of Rights. First Amendment is to be selectively incorporated with the Fifth Amendment. That's the Takings Clause, aka eminent domain in 1897. That involved a Chicago railroad company. It's the same thing as in Barron v. Baltimore, only the Supreme Court in this case ruled the exact opposite, that the city did have to pay this company money if they were taking their property. Just exactly the opposite of Barron v. Baltimore. So from 1897 onward, more and more Supreme Court decisions favored individual rights, federalizing the Bill of Rights. This graphic is from your book. You can see this is the percentage of Supreme Court decisions that involve civil liberties. It's really since the 50s and 60s onward, large percentages. You can see, I don't know, let's go to 71. 42% of all Supreme Court decisions in 1971 involve civil liberties. So we got 99, 53%. I mean, that's a big percentage. Okay, your rights. Your rights are not unlimited. Anyone who says your rights are unlimited just has no idea how the world works. You should just slap them. Don't slap them. Don't do that. Don't do that. But seriously, your rights aren't unlimited. Discussion question. What we call it when you engage in an activity that affects somebody else. The answer, like I know you all just said, is an externality. So it's affecting someone other than the person that's engaging in the behavior. So if your right is affecting other people's domestic peace and tranquility, if your right is violating other people's rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that means your right can be capped. It means your right can be limited. Notable freedom of speech cases. Okay, these two both involve communism, and I really encourage you guys to go on oyez.org and just look them up. The first one is Schenck versus the United States. That's 1919. By the way, when the United States is arguing a case, that's the Solicitor General. He's the head litigator for the U.S. Department of Justice. The Solicitor General. But I'll talk more about that when we do this judiciary. So Schenck and Dennis were both communists. Schenck was advocating draft dodging during World War I and was distributing communist literature. That's Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes ruled in that case and said, this was a 9-0 decision that said Schenck did not have the right to distribute this literature and advocate draft dodging because it created a, quote, clear and present danger. And that standard stood until the 50s. And Dennis is the same thing. Dennis was a communist, and he was advocating communism in the United States. So the literature that he was distributing was advocating communism. If you know anything about communism, Marx calls for a violent overthrow of the capitalist system. So when Dennis is advocating for communism, he wants a violent revolution. So if you're advocating that kind of stuff, you're creating a potential to have clear and probable danger. So that means that if your speech is creating a clear and probable danger, it can be capped. In other words, you can't say that kind of stuff. This one we talked about in class. This is Texas v. Johnson, 1989. Flag burning was ruled constitutional, and the reason for that is because it's freedom of speech. It's symbolism. The Schenck case in 1919. This is where you get the term yelling fire in a crowded theater. Obviously, if there's a fire, then you yell fire. If there's no fire, you don't have the freedom of speech rights to just say fire in a crowded movie theater. No one in their right mind would argue that you have unlimited freedom of speech if it's going to cause a ton of people to panic, chaos, and people get hurt. Freedom of speech continued. You have the right to be a mean person, aka hate speech. You have the right to mouth off, be a racist, be a bigot. You have the right to be a jackass, really. You have the right to say black people are horrible. You have the right to say white people are the devil. Anything like that is perfectly fine to say. Okay? Not that I'm saying that anyone should say those kinds of things, but in 1969, this case came to the Supreme Court. This is Clarence Brandenburg, who's a KKK leader in Ohio. I think it was around Cleveland. But he called the press up and had this press conference and basically blamed black people and Mexicans, other people, Jews and stuff, for all white people's problems. But he didn't actually advocate violence towards them or discrimination or any physical threats against them. So this went to the Supreme Court, and this creates the standard that we have today. You have the right to be a bigot. You have the right to be a racist, to hate on other religions or women or whatever it is. You have the right to say certain things. What you don't have the right to do is advocate any imminent lawless action. In other words, encourage people to break the law. If you're encouraging people to break the law, that is not protected under freedom of speech. So I'm quoting from the court decision in Brandenburg: crime, sabotage, violence, or unlawful methods of terrorism as means of accomplishing industrial or political reform, as well as assembling with any society group or assemblage of persons formed to teach or advocate the doctrines of criminal syndicalism. So it's like a crime syndicate. So in order to get together to break the law. Basically, if you're advocating breaking the law, that's not protected under freedom of speech. Alright, moving to religion. Here's a brief history of how freedom of religion works in America. Back in the day, you had intolerance. Just straight intolerance. Like, if someone had a different religion than you would kill them. You would just burn them. You would torture them, whatever. This is like wars between the Catholics and Protestants. And it's really like the way the Sunnis and Shiites get along to this day. Moving onward, you have acceptance and tolerance. This is all taking place in America, by the way. So the acceptance and tolerance is, this is, my religion's the best way to go, and you're going to hell, but I'll let you live. You know, as long as we can get along on the planet, then you can suffer eternal hellfire, once you die, but as long as we're on the planet together, let's live. I'm right, though, and you're wrong, but let's all live. Moving on to pluralism, this is the idea that basically every religion is right. We're all going to the place in the afterlife that's paradise. Hindus are right, and Muslims are right, and Christians are right, and we all worship a different God, but we're all going to the good place, stuff like that. And then modern day is more secular, so agnosticism or atheism, where there's a de-religious movement in America. People are abandoning religion, and churches, like, numbers are growing smaller and smaller. So there's less reliance on religion these days. Freedom of religion. So there's two freedoms in this clause. And there's the establishment and the free exercise clause. There's Voltaire. Let me read you his quote. James Madison loved me. In fact, he based freedom of religion on my quote. If one religion only were allowed in England, the government would possibly be arbitrary. If there were two, the people would cut each other's throats, but as there are such a multitude, they all live happy and in peace. What does that sound like? Well, it sounds just like Federalist 10. You should have immediately thought of that because that's pluralism. That's James Madison's idea that the more parties, they all cancel each other out. So that's Voltaire's idea with religion. Like if you have all these religions, then they just cancel each other out, and one religion doesn't take hold, impose their religious views upon other people. There are the two separate clauses that we call freedom of religion. There's the establishment clause, and then there's the free exercise clause. There's two different things. You have the right to practice what religion that you want, and also the government does not have the right to impose a particular religion upon people. Hey, look, it's people exercising for free. It's tremendous. Separation of church and state is not actually in the Constitution. That comes later in a letter by Thomas Jefferson in the early 1800s. Yeah, you can stretch. You can do yoga. It's all free. Free exercise. Take a look at this prayer. Almighty God, we acknowledge our dependence upon Thee and beg Thy blessings upon us, our teachers, and our country. So what religion is that? That could be basically any religion. It's just how general can you get? Bless us. I mean, this was a prayer that people were forced to say. Not forced to say. This was a voluntary school-wide school prayer that was like done in the mornings. This is in New Hyde Park, New York, which is right there on Long Island. This case went to Supreme Court in 1962. This struck down school prayer in public schools, voluntary or involuntary. Moving on, Lemon v. Kurtzman, 1971. This involved multiple states having a procedure like this. This was at Catholic schools, just like Coleman. The state taxpayers were reimbursing teachers if they were teaching a secular subject. In other words, Brother George, he teaches religion, and he also teaches U.S. So what if we had the Kingston School District taxpayers paying Brother George, part of his salary, not for teaching religion, but for teaching U.S. That was how it was working in Pennsylvania. There's a couple other states doing it. So the Supreme Court ruled that statutes passed by the state must have a secular legislative purpose. The statutes can neither advance nor inhibit religion. And this is the main one for the Lemon test. This creates the Lemon test. The statute cannot foster an excessive government entanglement with religion. In other words, government can't get too involved, intertwined, entangled with a religious purpose.